be more cozy. But if the sound's reaching you and you like where you're sitting, that's cool too. But you're welcome to come up front. But you're also welcome to stay where you're at. You know, whatever works. Come on in. We're going to have some shared learning, explore some things about digital inclusion, and I'll try to keep it really active. I tend to move a lot, but apparently I got to stay in the cage of the camera. And welcome to anyone in hybrid remote connection world. We're glad to have you here. All right. Let's begin. So I'm going to share with you some things about our multi-layered approach to transform digital inclusion in Fresno Unified, in Fresno and Fresno County. I trust what I'm going to share with you is probably similar to what many others have experienced, and hopefully you can learn some things from what we've done. You might, it depends on where we're at with time, also challenge some of what we've done or add some of your own insights. I'm hoping that through this, we'll leave encouraged to do more, better together, to include more of our students throughout their daily journey with the internet supports and tools they need to be ready for their, what I call, hashtag as yet imagined futures. Because we don't exactly know what will be their jobs in 10, 20, 30 years and what those jobs will look like and what the gig economy will look like. So we've got to get them fully prepared, especially students in public K-12 education. I'm currently the Executive Officer of IT at Fresno Unified. I'm co-founder of the Fresno County Coalition for Digital Inclusion, board member with the Schools Healthcare Library Broadband Consortium, and a raving fan member of COSUN. I hope you all are as well. Yes, exactly. I've worked in industry, higher education, and since 2014 in K-12. And served on boards from numerous different sectors just to keep me connected, and quite frankly, I like systems level work. I give you that perspective so you understand where I'm coming from. I'm also a Fresno native by way of the Congo from Canada, and I deeply love my community. If someone says, hey, do you want to move somewhere else to only work at Harvard? I would say no, because you can make a huge difference in Fresno, and every kid deserves that difference. Fresno Unified has 70,000 students. We have 89% eligibility for free and reduced lunch. So we're high or challenged with socioeconomic disparities and poverty, but we're rich in the assets of our students, families, community, teachers, and staff if we create the right conditions for that. These digital ecosystems is creating the right conditions so every student can actively engage in learning, work, and life, and I would say throughout their daily journey. That's what we all experience, right? And how do we make sure that's a reality for our students, not just in the classroom, not just at school, but throughout their journey so that they can succeed? I remember my daughters, so a cheer out to women in STEM. They finished college math in high school, but in 9th grade, I was like, I don't remember that stuff really well, you know. Let me have you look into something called Khan Academy, and they can access that throughout their daily journey. And they did, and they also had communities of practice where they're helping each other out. That meant they had connectivity, and shoot, that was quite a few years ago now. So we've got to move from the gaps, you know, the homework gap, the digital divide gap, you know, to access, adoption, meaningful use, and inclusion. That's what a mature, rich digital ecosystem looks like. I keep pointing this at the screen. Let's go this way. So a few definitions. Foundations for a future ready, the systems and social practices inherent in schooling, teaching, and learning to support future ready students with the knowledge, skills, dispositions, and agency to navigate, as you know, a dynamic, interconnected, tech-infused world. I'm going to talk more about how we move that at a system level, and my journey is critical to that modern learning. So we have to sort of start with what are we trying to achieve for our students or have our students achieve? How do we work backwards in terms of what do we need to have for teaching, learning, schooling, and then what are the conditions for that modern learning? That includes the internet access, the devices, and the supports, as well as the know-why and know-how. Okay? We've done numerous things to help move in that direction. We were ready with networks, laptops, hotspots. But during the pandemic, as many of you have, we observed the neighborhood network problem. It's what I kept calling. Someone would say, hey, we have a Teams issue over here, or we're having students not able to connect through Clever2, this digital app. And so I had this term, neighborhood network problem. But we kept seeing it being really pervasive throughout the less affluent areas of Fresno. And yes, probably all of us had the blinders torn off our eyes about the digital inequity that exists. And we've deepened our understanding over the last couple of years. So here's some of the things that we've deepened our understanding about relative to digital inclusion. First of all, it's a complex system. Multiple actors and agents. Different personas in terms of the families and the students and their situations. In terms of affordability, socioeconomic conditions in particular. Different dynamics relative to different based on what city you live in, what neighborhood you live in. So it's a complex system. People's adoption and use is situated. I've heard often that, we've got service available there, but folks just aren't adopting it. Hey, it's a really complex, interrelated dance when it comes to adoption. And there's multiple factors involved. If you want to fall asleep, I wrote my dissertation on adoption and in technology and the different the theories that go into play. It's also that dance of service factors in adoption, affordability, availability, quality, and even affordability. I was surprised by Fresno Housing, so the Fresno Federal Housing Authority player in our market. They were saying in some of their apartment complexes, the median income is $10,000 a year. So why don't they just get affordable connectivity program, right? Well, that's a subsidy that if you don't get groceries. Why don't they just adopt at the Internet Essentials base level? That's groceries, right? And so how do you create, for example, place-based services? Anyway, so there's a complex dance there. And it's very specific, as I mentioned, to people's situation. There's also digital disinvestment. And I'll talk to you a bit more about that in a second. But fiber in some parts of Fresno was little, old, brittle, and sparse. And I got to know that over the years with with our fiber connections to our schools. In some parts of Fresno, we'd have more outages, and the engineer from the carrier would say, "Oh, when I walk into that vault, the fiber breaks," because it assumed, this works. What's the term? Can you hear me now? Except when you're in a really poor school, it doesn't work. And that was a aha. And I'd actually have folks come out. You carry a T-Mobile phone, you carry an AT&T phone. Let's walk from the highway to where these schools are that are in poverty, and there wasn't a good cell signal at all. So my challenge is this to us. The other is digital ecosystem design as performed, or perform as designed, right? So unless we change their design and shape them differently, they will continue to look like they have over the last 20 years, which will either further the gap, or if we do our work well, will change what's in play. So digital equity, the challenge here is twofold. One is to our anchor institutions, and they're not all in the room, but healthcare, libraries, and education, and to wellness for the family and wellness for the people, right? But I say the spark to ignite our economy, so it's very nonpartisan, gets everyone excited. And so the key in regions and neighborhoods is that you can't have the healthcare trying to solve for it separately, the city, the county. We've all got to work together if we're going to actually have the funds land where they will, the investments go where they should. The second piece, and this is to education, this is the big challenge here. The FCC allows this, so this isn't any heretical statement. Digital equity is now critical to our mission. It's not mission creep. It's not scope creep. It's now part of what our mission is if we're going to have students be able to be successful in the modern world and get modern learning. We can leverage our networks, the fiber to our schools, to what's called to and through community networks. So just there's ways to do that. It's not outside of policy. So I just encourage you to think bold in that regard. All right. So the most significant insight we had was that where there was digitally unconnected and underserved populations were undercounted massively by the FCC map and our state map. And that's a real problem because that's what's guiding the federal and state investments in broadband. The digital disinvestment, the challenge is that continues to move in that direction, and unless we do something different, those investments will continue to go beyond where our students need them into their neighborhoods. So as you probably know, the current FCC data maps are based upon carriers' self-reported service availability. And I'll show you what that data looks like. And the key here is the uncounted populations, and hence the most likely further disinvested populations, are the unconnected, I'll show you what that looks like, and the unserved. So if you look at the FCC map for the county of Fresno, 1 million person population, it gives us a 2.3% unserved. That's 9,300 residents, okay, out of a million. And it's a fairly large area. Gosh, I should remember, it's very large, larger than some states. The CPUC basically follows, the California Public Utility Commission follows that. But the census, the knocking on doors of 2020, it was saying there's about 17% unserved. That's a pretty big discrepancy, right? The Microsoft Digital Equity Dashboard, open source data, and a higher sampling of throughput based on download-upload speeds for the Microsoft Windows updates, it suggests 50% were unserved. Much bigger discrepancy, and quite frankly, more robust data. So thanks to Microsoft and Airband for creating that kind of data to share and to inform us. Okay, so you see there's some discrepancy. Now, how do we help people understand that to drive the investment? So we need to get beyond the neighborhood network problem, and while the qualitative stories, the anecdotes are important and they help us understand situations, we need to get beyond the student at Taco Bell because they couldn't connect at home stories. Very relevant stories. How do we get that to scale? So I've programmed in about 8 languages in my past life and been, in the leadership roles. And so I said, okay, I've done something like this way back in 2001. And so some of the developers I've got some talented folks. Some of them were born later, but they're more talented than I. And so they go, okay, we can write that. And so Brian, I want to mention his name because he's done some great work around this. Brian Alvarado wrote this piece of code. We call it My Quality of Internet, MyQoI. Open source, I'll show you the links in a second. We've got a Windows version, and the County Office of Ed wrote a Chrome version. It does measurements of internet connectivity. We have over 11 million measurements since July of 2021 using crowdsourced, big data with 60,000 plus laptops in students' hands. 9:30, 3 o'clock, and 7 o'clock, we do a measurement. And it tracks upload, download, long lat, latency, the carrier, the student, and the device. And we've shared it with the county, the city. We've actually shared it with the Public Policy Institute for California that's going to be coming out with a study on the uncounted and the investment and that disparity and what do we do about that. I'm looking forward to that report because it can influence policymakers. So here's the kicker. We found that based on that data, 14.5% of the population 72,000 of our city with 500,000 would be considered unserved. Now, if you extrapolate that to homes that didn't have a Fresno Unified student, that number reaches almost 27%. Much different than what we saw with the FCC maps and the CPUC maps, right? So, and I found when I talked to other people in education in California that most other cities, surprisingly, San Francisco, Oakland, others, had their pockets of unserved that were uncounted. Okay? Yes, rural, unserved also exist, but they're generally also already on the maps, and there's lots of investment sources for that. We have to pay attention to that also. But the uncounted are mostly in the urban areas of poverty and in multi-dwelling units. So that's how do we get this down to actually a data point? We're also working with the state to try to influence their mapping. I'm on Shelby's board, and our broadband mapping group has seen probably 5 to 10 states that are using multiple sources of data, sometimes their own crowdsourced data to influence their maps and to make great decisions. So here's why this sort of data matters. If I send Jose home with homework, but he doesn't have connectivity, I might want to help Jose understand where the community centers are. Oh, that Khan Academy video before you go home, because I've got great wireless at our schools. So that's the kind of personal level insights and interventions that we can have from this data. We also can help our schools understand where the neighborhoods are that need the most support because of the disinvestment that's occurred there. This isn't going to be something we fix overnight, so what do we do in the meantime? And it's also a great way to help people better understand where investment needs to be. This is literally changing the conversation in California. I've got colleagues from Oakland, LA, San Diego who are saying this needs to become the standard. It's open source, and we'll find our way there. But so let's look at what else we saw. It's actually, that number needs to be 11 million now, sorry. It's no longer 8 million. Okay, so I talked about the unserved. That's 25 megabits per second or less. We've also got, by California standards, the underserved. That's 100 megabits per second or less. But here's the kicker. Since about a year and a half, we have students who have a laptop who have never connected even once at Beyond School, okay? And that's 17% of our students. And yeah, there could be explanations like the teacher's not using digital resources in ways that the students would want to use, and the student doesn't have curiosity to even get onto the network at home. But really, at the end of the day, not connecting once at 7 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, over that long of a stretch of a time when they've got a laptop, is generally going to be something more substantive than that. By the way, our network is, the hotspots are free to the students and they're content filtered, so it's not a security issue as well. So that gives you one more data point. Here, so for those in hybrid remote world as well as here, these are the links to our GitHub repository if you want to do something like this in your district. It's on the deck. I've posted it to the the CoSUN website. So you're welcome to, or if you want to take a picture or reach out to me, and we're happy to we believe that in every area that does well helps our country do well and helps move us forward as a whole and helps create better citizens of the world. So, okay, cool. So, multi-layered response. And one is put the necessary conditions in the schools and beyond the schools. So we've got hotspots, devices, supports. Latest and greatest from Cisco. We've got Wi-Fi on the buses. We did that 7 years ago and did a refresh just a year ago, and that makes a big difference. By the way, it increased ridership on the buses, and also anecdotally from bus drivers, it improved behavior. We've done you've got to make sure there's shifts in teaching and learning, otherwise what do we have the conditions for modern learning if you don't actually have the modern learning experiences? That's two. And the fourth one I talked about was data. And that data doesn't have to be MyQI. There are lots of other data sources like the Microsoft Digital Equity Dashboard, the ACS. The other is we've put in place infrastructure. I want to show you those two pieces. Dark leased fiber and private LTE. Policy, we're really elected person about these things. We work with City Council. The challenge is to help them understand every one of our stakeholders in every one of our homes, right? And what do we do about that? And we've started a coalition, co-founder of that, which is the Fresno Coalition for Digital Inclusion, because there's strengths in numbers. We've got over 30 plus organizations, community-based organizations, anchor institutions, all working together. In this deck, I've also got our policy positions, so you're welcome to look at that. We won't dive deep into that. I've also got information about our structure. If you want a charter, I'd be happy to share it. It's on our website. So you have all access to that, and I'll show you two things and then get a chance for some interaction here. First of all, yeah, it was about a 6-year fight with the incumbent. They wanted to punt. They weren't interested in bidding. But at the end of the day, we had a competitive bid, and thanks to the FCC's E-rate modernization in 2014, we have dark leased fiber in our district. We're about 1 week away from all 114 sites being connected. It's actually 115 now, being connected. And borrowing from Houston ISD, did a ring, and in one of our team, Jack Pambukian, came with the idea of, because of power outages and other things like this, our sub-rings actually are connected to different nodes on the core ring, so if power goes, traffic still flows. It's a beautiful thing. Instruction loss doesn't happen anymore now. Power outage at a school, sure, but the network doesn't go down in terms of our wide area network and out to the internet. 20 times to 100 times the speed of 2019, 40 million savings over 20 years. That goes to the taxpayers as it should, and increased uptime. I'm totally happy to share our pro forma contract invitation to bid. Great work along with us to create that airtight bid, so you couldn't claim to be, I got a better idea than what you're trying to do. You had to be compliant from a responsiveness standpoint. So that, and what that did as well is this brings fiber to the fiber desert. In the city, for example, are able to say, hey, there's a community center. So if you can see my cursor, I don't know if you can. No. There's a community center in the southeast part of Fresno that doesn't have internet connectivity. They now have fiber strands they can bring there because the carriers got extra fiber that they brought it to their schools. We've got a church that does tutoring after school in southwest Fresno, and they're like, we can never get any of the carriers to get us internet. Guess what? One of the strands is going straight to that church. They've got fiber going to that church, and that tutoring can happen at high speeds now. So, and areas that formerly were, would get industries in that polluted and weren't great can now get a data center or a help center or whatever, call center, whatever it might be, because they've got fiber into those communities. Then the other challenge is, I'd mentioned the cell signals and internet connectivity across the daily journey. So we think it disrupts the ecosystem a bit to get something better there. But it also might be an overlay network across people's daily journey, because it's not just about wireline connectivity. So what might we do? And so it was about a year and a half ago we started, and we did phase one of a private LTE network using CBRS, and covered about, we did 15 schools, covering about 22 school neighborhoods. It was good, wasn't great. Adoption is low. What we know from talking with others is you've got to have really good reach and depth and overlap of coverage before you start having better adoption. We also knew from RF analysis that we needed to increase the size of the height, because at our elementary schools, you're at about 30 feet. So we are doing 70-foot wood poles, looks like just a regular telephone pole, a little taller, and we're going to do that with 50 sites at the end of the day that have a radio on them, and it's covering by 2024, 80% of the district. And so that's exciting, a little crazy. That's just one more example of what we need to do to get there. The challenge is also on the engineering, the state approval process for the engineering, the architecture, probably like 9 months. But by the time we'll get there, there'll probably still be 5 to 10 years, hopefully, of others investing in these markets and getting better services there. And if they don't, we've got 70-foot poles to put the next best thing on, in 5 years from now. So more information about Fresno Coalition for Digital Inclusion and our work. There's the website for it, a bit about our structure. And the challenge for us is what can we do as our individually, as anchor institutions, together with other anchor institutions in our region, or with some of the folks like HP, Microsoft, and others, from a broad ecosystem standpoint, to change the landscape of internet connectivity so that every student can learn throughout their daily journey so they're better prepared for their as-yet imagined futures. We've got a few minutes left. I want to ask you to say, what was your big insight, or Phil, that's crazy, tell me more about it, or I've got a better idea. We don't have all the solutions. This is new space, and our eyes have been opened up, but it doesn't mean our minds are always as clear as they need to be or our hearts as committed as necessary. So, yeah, others. The floor is open. I might ask, I think because of the folks who are joining remotely, if you could go to the mic. And as they say in those shows, like, step right up. Here we go. Thank you.
There we go. So in the state of Connecticut, they're just doing, they're trying to look across the state, kind of like what you did about connectivity. And so that's a great idea, that open source, to really get the good data.
Right.
I'm just trying to think of, how did you come about that, and how long did that process take? because that's something that we could bring back, and instead of relying on the carriers, like we have large cities and some rural districts that we could, our state probably is the size of Fresno. But
Right. Great point. So the app's built now. We don't have an Apple version, so that's probably one more, and a cell phone version. But it works on Windows and Chrome, so that's there. Deployment nowadays, because of everyone going to one-to-one, that isn't as big a deal in terms of deployment. It does, we've actually got a document that talks about the requirements in the architecture in the GitHub repository listed here. It just takes either an AWS and Azure API to gather that data when it comes in some place to store it, whatever you might choose to do. So that takes a little bit of effort. County Office of Education can do that well, and then what they would do is they'd tag their separate districts, or state could do this as well. Smaller states might say, okay, I'm going to tag each district. When that data comes in, we can then do some visualizations that are secure based on who's asking for that information, right? You can also ask that down to the student level to say, okay, it looks like John doesn't have great connectivity, but he did. What's going on, John? And we literally during the pandemic because I had some data, thanks to Microsoft, we were able to glean that we had principals would knock on doors and say, I understand your hotspot's not working, or you don't have a hotspot, right? So it's a reasonable lift. Again, we're happy to be in conversation with anyone on that. We've now got 2 districts, ourselves and another district that has about 12,000 laptops. It's more about just getting the superintendent to understand the importance of this. Interestingly enough, we were talking with Oakland, who's looking to do this as well, and our students do travel. And so we were seeing, like what does this look like in Oakland? We actually had a lot of dots in Oakland already because our students travel. The other thing we've done is, and we'd be happy to share this, we've talked to our attorneys, so we figured out this isn't a directory information, this is purely operational information. We've got a methodology to anonymize the students, so there's no risk there. And then I know it's not a technical name, but we wiggle the long and lat so that you can't say it was exactly this house, and that way there's no shame. You wouldn't know if it's 20 students in the neighborhood or 1 student getting 20 measurements. But we also keep it local enough. I think that there's a specificity to that, so you still would know it's that neighborhood. Because what you don't want to do is it's that census block, which is where we have been traditionally, before the FCC modernized the data. So I don't think it's a heavy lift. It tends to be more just a political and a commitment piece, and then getting people to understand why the mapping data is so important. Quite frankly, it doesn't have to be what the state adopts, but it can be through coalitions of committed and similarly concerned. It just can be an alternate map to be in conversation. Yeah, go ahead. Hi.
My name is Lucy Gray. Thanks for your presentation. I'm the project director for digital equity here at COSIN, and we are, one of our projects is a digital equity map that has some data that you're talking about.
Right.
And we'd love to talk to you more
Yeah.
about this. And Enide is the company that's producing this in Tableau for
Okay.
us through a grant from Google and Dell. So
Oh, great.
People previewed it
Okay.
a little bit. It's
Okay.
small and large
Yeah.
school districts.
7 districts getting data about what was working, what wasn't.
This is part of this. There was a couple of surveys, I think.
Okay.
Home
Yeah.
Home connectivity. It was a
Right.
home connectivity grant.
Okay.
So maybe that's what you're referring to.
I think so, yeah.
And,
Great.
And there'll be an opportunity for 3 or 4 districts to include their data in this
Okay.
project.
Great.
There'll be an application process.
Fantastic.
online.
All right.
But this is really exciting. So
Yeah.
And I appreciate the underserved angle or the
Yeah.
unconnected angle. That's something
Yep.
that we haven't necessarily talked about.
Yeah. Equity has got to be our driver for investment because, well, I don't know if you've heard Bitwise. They came from Fresno. They're now in like 13 cities across the U.S. and invested in underdog cities in tech, okay? Think of them like a tech incubator. They do upskilling, and they've got workplace, co-workspaces and all. Anyway, this co-CEO came from a small rural school district that didn't have internet connectivity. There were just some opportunities for her to do what she's done. Now she's on Fortune magazine and Top 50 and all, right? But what we can unleash if we create the opportunities. So thank you for COSUN, Shelby, NDIA, Microsoft, HP, all others. This is a moment where we can actually put new maps in place, new structures in place that can change.
On the site itself, and admittedly I haven't navigated to it yet, but do you also have access to some of the legal guidance that you have received around the privacy issues that you spoke about?
Right.
I think that's a top of mind question for any district or LEA that might.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're welcome to reach out to me on that one directly, and I'll share what our attorney agreed to, and then what we just actually email parties and say, hey, here's your expectations. We didn't even do it as an MOU because it's operational data. It's like we send our traffic analysis from buses to the city. It's operational data, you know. Yeah.
Okay, and then second final question is just in regards to, and if I missed it, I apologize, but how many organizations are currently utilizing this?
Ourselves and Central Unified School District.
Okay.
And the county has the infrastructure and is working to set up other small districts as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, what we don't know is we've talked to Baltimore, lots of other districts and people across over the last 2 years, the U.S., so we don't know who may have adopted something similar, but that we know of. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know this is a national conference, but
Yeah.
from California as well, San Diego.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I serve on the board for CNIC, which
Yes.
is a TPA
Yep.
for installing 10,000 miles of fiber
Right.
across the state of California. And we run into the same issues as far as the telemetry,
Yeah.
feds, CPUC, et cetera,
Right.
census blocks, all of that.
Yep.
We know that there's inaccuracies all over
Right.
the place. And so this is intriguing, first time I'm hearing about it, and so I may take that back to.
Fantastic. I'd love to connect afterward. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, particularly after lunch, for being an attentive audience and enjoying your time. Thank you.